Hey guys, it is Sophia the Shadow Hunter, and today I'm doing my book review on Mary Boleyn The Mistress of Kings by Alison Weir. I really enjoyed this book. I finished it last night, and I should have finished it a little quicker because I don't know, but on Goodreads, there says there's so many pages, but a lot of that stuff is just notes, and so you don't have to read it. You don't need to read it unless you want to go and look up all the things in here, which I so would totally do if I had access to those books, but they're probably hard to find and very expensive. So this book is about Mary Boleyn and her family and her marriages and all her miscarriages and the children she had. What it was like growing up in that time period, her different family members, her siblings, her relationship with her sister Anne, which they had a couple like falling outs, things like that, as sisters tendally do. And I just love reading time periods about this. I did not think this book was going to be nonfiction, but it was. But guys, I love nonfiction, so that's just right up my alley. But it said history maligned her, the truth is far more fascinating. People really thought that she was very promiscuous, and she probably was a little bit, but not necessarily in the ways people thought it to be. How they were back then with, marriage and children and their values, it is so hard to think that, especially for every people who are single out there or who can't have children, to get forced into a marriage with someone you don't know, you don't love, and you are, required to produce a male heir. And maybe you are, maybe you aren't, but these things are put on you. You have to do them. You really don't have a choice unless you want your whole family, to disown you or to just be mad at you and to cause problems, because that back then that's what people were supposed to do. They're supposed to get married and have children, and that's still what people do today. However, back then in the earlier days, in this time period, it was really needed to help growth of wealth and family in the countries, and I completely understand that. But to put those ideas and to force these on people, especially if they can't do it, is really hard. Just to think how it made them feel, probably not very good. So I'm going to read some of my favorite things that kind of caught up with me when I was reading this book. It says, Henry's infidelity was not limited to the periods when his wives were pregnant, although he almost inevitably strayed at those times. It was a wife's duty to maintain a dignified silence if she discovered that her husband was playing away from the marriage bed. The one was on her to adapt to circumstances, but Catherine had no intention of being silent and continued to berate Henry for his betrayal. And something else that I really found interesting, for those people with me being Reformed, and there was a lot about John Calvin and the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church in here, which I found very interesting to me. It was really cool to get some of that Bible history, that church history in this book. So let me read you what it says. Okay, it says, the Boleyns were devoted to the Reformed faith, but although the study of the books owned by Rockford suggests that he came quite near to becoming a Lutheran, Anne and her father died as Orthodox Catholics, so it would be more accurate to say the Boleyns were zealous for the cause of reform within the Catholic Church. Given her background as a member of family notorious in Henry's seventh reign for its aggressive reformist opinions and rumored to be more Lutheran than Luther himself, Mary probably shared these views and approved of the education afforded her sons, especially after her second marriage. For William Strafford later revealed himself to be so staunch a Protestant that he was prepared to choose exile in Geneva during Mary Tudor's reign rather than suffer persecution for his beliefs, and there became a friend of the astute reformer John Calvin. It is also plausible that he had embraced the cause of reform, if not the Lutheran faith, before or during his marriage to Mary Boleyn. Indeed, part of her attraction to him may have been the fact that she came from such a famously reformist family. Mary's daughter, Catherine Carey, would marry a man who was well affected to the Protestant religion. It would be surprising, therefore, if Mary herself did not support the cause of reform, at the very least, since she died before it became acceptable and safe to come out as a Protestant. There were no way of proving this, but the view of her background and her family connections is a credible supposition. Like her sister Anne, however, she probably remained outwardly at least an Orthodox Catholic at the end of her days, dying in the faith of her forefathers. There is no source that gives credibility to the statement that Mary was reconciled to her father, who allowed her and William Strafford to reside at Rochford Hall, or the assertion that she was never fully forgiven, but persuaded her father to let her live with Stanford and one of the Boleyn properties, Rochford Hall in Essex. Prior to her clandestine marriage, Mary had apparently lived at Haverclass or at court before his death in 1539. Wiltshire was considering cutting Mary off and leaving her share of his property to his granddaughter. The future Elizabeth won so clearly they remained estranged. It is unlikely, therefore, that he would have permitted her to live at Rochford Hall with the husband of whom he deeply disapproved. So there's a little bit of the history of the church back then. Obviously, this was in London when the Catholic Church was the universal church and the only church until the Reformation came out. Let me read you some of the last lines of the book. And it made references to the movies, which I watched, but I probably need to watch because it's been years again, like The Other Boleyn Girl, which has things that are really untrue, but now I've read this book, I could watch the movie and have more of a better insight on it. It says, normally the existence of duplicated portraits suggests there were some demand for the image of the important or royal personage, but it is credible that in this case, after a second miniature may have been painted for William Carey. Furthermore, that suggested Boleyn link to Huguenot is strengthened by the fact that later was appointed king's painter in 1531 when Anne Boleyn was riding high in the king's favor. The grant of office was confirmed 3 years later on the day before George Boleyn was made Lord Varden of the Clinique Ports. All of the speculation, though, and without any more evidence to go on, the identity of the sitter in those miniatures must remain in question. So they still don't know who's the sitter in those. They still don't know who's the sitter in those pictures. It says, it has been suggested that the miniature of a lady in the collection of the Duke of Wiltshire by Lucas Hornberg depicts Mary Boleyn, the costume worn by the sitter in that of the early mid-1520s. There had been some repainting of her features at one time, erroneously labeled Catherine of Aragon. The first recorded in the collection of Charles II, reigned in 1616 through 85. It has been claimed in recent years that this miniature is an early portrait of Anne Boleyn, but there is no convincing evidence to support the identification. While the woman depicted as blonde and bears little resemblance to Anne Boleyn in authenticated portraits. It has also been claimed that the brooch on her breast depicts Anne's falcon badge, but some have noticed that the wings appear to point downward on either side, while those of Anne's falcon sweep up toward the right. The brooch is so small that it is impossible, even through magnification, to obtain a clear image of it. But it can be plainly seen in the second version of the miniature. It actually bears an image of a kneeling woman wearing a white girdle gown with a low square neck and long hanging sleeves. The second version, previously in the Watney collection of Cornbury Park, is now the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto, and once thought to depict Catherine of Aragon and later Jane Seymour, on the grounds that it had once been owned by classical descendant Charles Seymour, 1662 to 1748. In this version, the sitter is wearing a different hood, a black damask gown, and ornate pendant with 3 drop pearls, which is not seen in the burlesque version. The brooch is the same, though. So I hope you guys like this video. Please let me know in the comments down below what you think about it. If you guys have read the book, please leave your comments down below. And if you haven't, go subscribe to my channel. And I'll see you guys next time with another video. Goodbye.